grew up in Reno, and all right, I think we're.
It says live.
I think we're live. Check my. Yeah, we are live. I'm gonna call this agricultural tragedemic.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So welcome, Daylight Burners. I am live here with Mr. Corb Lund, the hurtin Albertan himself. And we are going to, we're just going to talk a little bit about his music. We're going to talk a little bit of life. And most of my listeners know you very well. You are probably the most featured artist on my playlist. And so we all know your music, but I think we'd like to get to know a little bit more about Corb Lund, the person. So welcome to the show. I appreciate you being on. And how's the quarantine treating you?
It's okay. We had about 3 or 4 months of touring lined up, and we were just into about 10 days of it. We did Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, and then our last show was in Greeley outside of Denver, and then everything got shut down, and we just had to hook her north and get home across the border. So it's kind of on one hand, it's kind of a drag because we lost a whole bunch of touring, and our new record's supposed to come out pretty quick, so that's all screwed up. But I mean, everybody's in the same boat, so I can't complain really. We're all healthy.
Well, that's good.
The good side of it, honestly, if I compartmentalize that part out of my brain, that having a bit of time off and being able to catch up at home isn't so bad actually. Because I've been burning through my long-term to-do list, house stuff I've been meaning to do and fix things and build stuff.
Nice.
Talk to me in 2 months. I might be a little stir crazy by then. I think I'm going to finish working on the house for another couple of weeks and just write another record.
There you go. That'll be cool. I'm really looking forward to your new album. Before we get into that, I got to pay for some bills here. So I got to tell everybody about Loma Livestock. They're a little sale barn in Loma, Colorado, probably the best sale barn west of the Mississippi, if not the entire country. I can't speak for the Canadian sale barns, but Loma Livestock's as good as it gets there here in the States. They're owned and operated by my good buddy George Raftopoulos, located at 1369 12 and a half Road there in Loma, Colorado. They've got a sale every Wednesday with the cows and singles starting at 10 o'clock, followed by the feeders at 11. And they also do a lot of production sales for Diamond Peak Cattle and some other producers. So if you're in Western Colorado, Eastern Utah, Southwest Wyoming area, you'd like to see some cattle sold, you'd like to sell your cattle, whatever, give them a holler at 970-858-9988 or check them out online at lomalivestock.com. Thanks, George. Thanks, Loma Livestock. And a new sponsor just coming on today is Mr. Nick Lute. He is he's a cowboy out of Dighton, Kansas. He's also starting up a rawhide braiding business. Right now, he is specializing in braided rawhide Hondas. And he sent me a couple here the other day. If you guys aren't familiar, any new listeners, this is the end of your rope. You feed the end back through it. That's what makes your loop. And these will add a little weight, a lot of quickness to your loop, and they're tougher than hell. They don't break. So check them out. You can find him on Instagram at Will Cowboy for Food or on Facebook, Nick Allen Lute. If you got any special requests, he can do that. But right now he's got some San Joaquin style and what he calls the Burnin Daylight special. So check him out. Let him know you heard about him on the Burnin Daylight podcast, and he'll cut you a nice little price discount. So check him out. Thanks to my sponsors, and let's get back into it. Corb, your new album is called Agricultural Tragic, which is pretty well carries on with the theme of your music career. I've been listening for about 15 years now, and you have a very, very unique writing style. And this particular album, just listen to you talk about it when you were in Elko, I'm really excited about it because I think it's it's like right in your wheelhouse, and I'm excited to see what else you got.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think this is record number 9 or 10 for us, and you kind of go through peaks and valleys in your career, and I about 4 or 5 years ago I kind of hit a spot where I was kind of bored. I wasn't bored with it, but I didn't really know where I was at, and I was kind of treading water a little bit, and so I kind of took a year or two off, and then came back to things with a renewed energy, and we ended up putting more work into this record than anything we've done for years. Like I wrote way more songs than I usually do, and me and the band worked on the music for a lot longer than usual. It turned out pretty good. Our goal was to make it sound big and rocking, but real organic. Like there's hardly any overdubs. You know what an overdub is? When you put extra stuff on.
Okay.
Like it's mostly just the 4 of us. I've had the same guys in my band for 15 years or something. So, we played thousands of live shows. So we sort of set it up so we rehearse the songs a lot ahead of time and then just kind of press record. So it's got a real live energy to it.
Nice. There's certain bands and artists that just sound better live, and whether it's a live record or a live show, it just sounds better. And I know you guys haven't put out a live album that I'm aware of anyways, but I've seen you play several times, and it just the music is so much better. Like I'd say like you guys and Jason Boland and probably Turnpike Troubadours, if they ever decide to get back together. You guys take it to another level when you're playing live, and it's just it's a lot of fun to watch, and I don't know, there's just something you can always tell like real when the music's real. It seems like that's kind of what has drawn me to your stuff, to like I said, Evan Felker and Turnpike and Jason Boland, stuff like that, because you guys write your own songs, and there's some kind of grittiness, and it's real, and I think that it shows when there's some realness behind the music.
Yeah, well, the music business is funny because, as you know, there's a whole branch of the music business that's very corporate and very geared towards the lowest common denominator, and it's kind of like McDonald's, and that's fine. I mean, if people like it, I'm not judging it, but I've never been attracted to that kind of thing. My whole life, ever since I was 14 and decided I want to play music, the whole appeal to me was the live interaction and the storytelling aspect of it, and telling your own stories and connecting with people live. And so, a lot of people make records and then they tour to support the record, but I'm the opposite. I tour so that I can make records, the other way around. I make records so that I can tour, because I like playing live shows. There's nothing like it. There's a real level of communication there that's really meaningful, and I think you feel it in the audience too. Because I mean, I know what it's like to be an audience member at a show like that, where there's a real connection between the audience and the artist, and that's a real special thing. That's about as close as I get to religion.
Yeah, well, that's there's just something about the artists like yourself that live to play for an audience rather than to make a bunch of money, or something along those lines.
Making money's fun.
That's always fun, but it's kind of like cowboying. Like you don't, you're not in it for the money. You're in it because you love what you do, and on your end, you happen to be able to make some money on what you do. Cowboying, you don't ever really
depends on the day.
Yeah,
I'm not making any money. I'm not making any now, that's for sure.
I was gonna say the quarantine kind of killed your money making ability at the moment, but
no, but you're right. Like that's just a byproduct. Like honestly, it sounds a little like a cliche, but expressing my thoughts and culture and feelings and outlook on things through the music is important to me. Like I know a lot of people in the radio world. Like I got a lot of friends that do that kind of stuff, and it's real tough because they're in such a little box, like they can't believe the stuff that I get to write. And to me, it just seems normal. I write whatever the hell I want, and I've just built a career on that. But those guys in the radio business, they can't do that. They have to they got 10 different people working on it and tweaking it till it doesn't offend anybody and it doesn't mean anything at the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm. And they all sound the same.
And I mean, honestly, that's never really been the people that I've looked up to. Like that's just a whole nother track that doesn't involve me that much. Like my whole life, my heroes have always been individuals, like whether it's Christopherson or Ian Tyson or Chris Ledoux or some of the rock bands I liked, like all of them were unique and did their own thing. And a lot of them were successful, but it was on their terms, right? Jerry Reed's another one. I'm a big Jerry Reed nut.
Oh, I love Jerry Reed. Eastbound and Down, Amos Moses. Like, if he's on, I hear him one time, and then I immediately go to Spotify and listen to a few more Jerry Reeds. Like he's not on my regular playlist, but if I do come across him, I go on a little deep dive. And
what's funny about him is, I can write fun, lighthearted songs all day. That's one of the easier things for me, like the cows around and the truck got stuck, which is cool. I like those songs, but sometimes I start to feel kind of silly about it and want to be a little more of a serious artist. And then when I'm feeling that way, I remember Jerry Reed and Roger Miller, and I don't feel so bad.
Yeah, that's funny. We were just doing we did what we call a bull session every Thursday. I tried to, and I get with some of my boys, and we just bullshit kind of like we're doing here. And we did a Joe Diffie tribute because Joe Diffie, I kind of described him as a guilty pleasure artist. Like he is so stereotypical 90s prime country. Like he checked every box. He had the mullet, he had the stash, he had that same sound that everybody had. But for something about Joe Diffie, he was like, you knew that's who he was. Like you don't rock the mullet and the stash for that long without that just being you. And I was kind of bummed. Well, I was actually really bummed to hear that, because he just had hit after hit after hit, and it was right in that 90s country style, but there was something a little different about him. And so we did a little tribute to him.
You know what I've discovered with radio country is that, and again, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but you just figure they got to the point where they couldn't water it down anymore, and they figure out a way to make it worse.
Yeah.
and what's funny is, back in the 90s, I was into rock and roll music then. I was in a heavy rock band out of high school for a few years. I like all kinds of stuff. I grew up with Marty Robbins, but but when Garth was current, I didn't like him at all. Because I liked Waylon and Jefferson and all that stuff, and I thought Garth was way too commercial. But it's funny because now so much water is passed under the bridge. I'll take Garth all day long compared to what's on the radio now.
Oh, absolutely. I was
at least he's got the odd horse in his tunes, right?
Yeah, he's got at least a little something there.
Yeah, I mean, and there's fiddles. I mean, it sounds like country music compared to what they got now.
Oh, absolutely. It was really refreshing going to Elko and seeing such a thriving cowboy music scene.
Yeah,
and I got to see. I think the first show we saw, we ended up showing up a little bit late, but we went over and saw Ned Ledoux, and he was playing like at 11 o'clock in the morning or something. It was a really early show, and but I think we saw like 3 or 4 different concerts that day. We went from Ned Ledoux over to Dave Stamey, and then we watched you and Forrest Van Tile and Ramblin' Jack, which was, I was also told don't to fanboy out, but I got to say that was one of the coolest shows I've ever seen, just how laid back it was and how you guys just shot the shit, played a song, shot the shit some more. You got Ramblin' Jack started, and he doesn't quit. And
it's hard not to shoot the shit with Jack.
I know. You're gonna have to put me in touch with him. I think he'd be great for the Burnin Daylight crew.
You just gotta press record and sit there.
He's good at Burnin Daylight.
There's this guy. There's this folk singer named Utah Phillips. He was active in the 60s and 70s, and I heard him say that that Jack was the most true anarchist he's ever seen, because like not politically, but just the way he lives his life. It's like only lives 30 seconds into the future all the time. You know?
That's awesome. I just found out about Ramblin' Jack here like a couple years ago, and I've just been fascinated by, like, he's like the real life version of Forrest Gump. Like, he's just been around and seen everything. And I mean, he toured with Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie, and
Bob Dylan stole a lot of his style from him.
Yeah.
And he hung out with Woody when he was 19. Like when Jack was 19, he hung out with Woody lots.
Yeah. And it's just wild, the stuff that guy has seen and done. And I'm kind of a history nerd. I imagine somewhat like yourself, going through your albums. Like the Horse Soldier album has got to be one of my favorites.
That's just
man. I love it. That's awesome. That is awesome. So do you ever are you a podcast guy much, or do you have time for that?
I am.
Do you listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History?
I was a Dan Carlin fan from episode 2. I'm like old school Dan Carlin. I've emailed with him before. It was like talking to Elvis.
No shit.
Yeah, he's the best, man. He's the godfather.
I feel like we just became best friends. I just need to learn how to play music a little better, and I'll come join you on tour.
It's funny you say that, because I've been telling people to listen to Hardcore History for over a decade.
His stuff is amazing. Like, I don't think there's a single episode that's under 2 hours, but it's just like story time for me. I'll sit down, and
he's really good because he's so enthused about it. Like, you can tell he just loves every second of it, right? And he's really enthused about it. He brings a real he brings it to life, you know, because I mean, I've read some of that stuff before, and it's not nearly as interesting as when he brings it to life on the podcast.
Yeah.
What's your favorite ones?
I think my favorite one is the Ghosts of the Ostfront and the World War I episode.
Some dark shit, eh?
Oh man, it's dark.
Remember the part where they make the road out of frozen Germans?
Yeah, it's just wild. Frozen Germans. There's this bone piles out there in southern Russia, and it's crazy when he puts it into perspective, because, you know, us here in the Western world, I know, like, the Canadians had a lot of soldiers in World War II, and, you know, of course, the U.S. I think we lost a couple 100,000, and we get all the credit, and then you look at what the Russians had to do to stop from being overrun, because, you know, like, us in Canada, we were never in any real threat of being taken over.
Right.
But we get all the credit for it. And we did. I mean, we did a lot. But you talk about a couple million people that the Russians lost, and they were invaded.
12 million or something.
Something crazy. I mean,
Carlin says that if you isolated the Eastern Front in World War II, it would still be the biggest land battle ever, the biggest war ever fought, even if it was taken out of World War II, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that's excluding, you know, the Western Front and the Pacific Theater altogether, and you know, Africa. It's just the Russian front is the biggest.
What about the Mongols
ever.
one? How about that one?
The Mongols. That one is really good, and the one that he did about the Reformation, like the Jacobins and the I forget what the other ones were, but
you mean that town in Germany, Munster or whatever?
Yeah,
Prophets of
Doom. That was wild. Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you, I'm not sure how far back you go with his stuff, but he's since the beginning, like, he's sort of gravitated towards longer and longer ones, like, and now they're like 5-part huge. When those are cool, but in the early days, like the first 10 or 12 episodes are all like from 20 to 45 minutes long, and they're really good too, because they're just just like, the new ones are almost like audiobooks, which is awesome, but it's kind of nice. The old ones are kind of cool because you can just put them on a drive and it's under an hour, right? So if you don't have access to the old ones because they're not free anymore, they're really cheap. I'd highly recommend buying them if you don't have them, because they're they're like $1 or something.
Yeah, I think you can get the whole his whole series for like under $50 or something
Yeah,
like
it's worth
that.
every penny. I tell
Oh
people, I've
yeah.
been telling people for years, it's my favorite thing, bar like more than books, more than music, more than movies. Like hardcore history is the shit.
Yeah, I love it. I can't wait till he puts out the next one on the Pacific Theater.
Yeah, that's good, eh?
That's shaping up to be a great one.
Mhm.
Uh
Yeah.
it was oh, we got a couple comments here. Corb does the best concerts, like having a drink with the guy and shows breakout. Greetings from Oklahoma.
I got a song on my new record about called Oklahomans.
Yeah,
About all my favorite Okies, yeah.
nice. The Okies have a knack for being excellent storytellers, whether it's Woody Guthrie or Bob Childers or Evan Felker, Cody Canada. I mean, just down the list it goes.
Yeah, there's a real tradition there.
It's I grew up 8 miles from the Oklahoma Panhandle, so I've got a soft spot in my heart for Okies because they kind of get shit on from all directions. The Texans give them shit, the Coloradans give them shit, the Kansans, everybody gives the Okies a hard time. But I've yet to meet an Okie that I don't like.
Yeah,
And
same. Merle Haggard.
yeah, Merle Haggard. He I guess was he born in Oklahoma or was he
No,
born
he's
in
from
California?
California, but his family
He was
were
part of the Okie
like,
migration.
yeah. What did is Bob? I'm sorry, is Bob Wills Texan or Oklahoma?
I think Bob Wills is Texas.
Is he Texas? Okay.
Yeah. See, I guess I came across your music through the Texas Oklahoma scene. That was big when I was like just finishing high school. Me and my buddies got into the Great Divide, and that of course led us into to Cross Canadian Ragweed, and then Boland, and then that we found Reckless Kelly, and
Yeah.
and then you open up that whole scene, and then all of a sudden there's this goofy Canadian fella that pops in singing cowboy songs, which is good. I grew up cowboying. I cowboy for a living now. I love the lifestyle. I made a podcast for the working cowboy. So when I hear some cowboy songs and then an entire record about horse soldiers, I was like, man, I got to look into this guy. And so I've been following you ever since. And you are like predictable in a sense because you know what your sound's gonna kind of be like, and you know there's gonna be some thought out songs, but then you pull some stuff out of nowhere that I didn't see coming. Like the cows around or the way to the gun. Is that the one that's kind of got that Buddy Holly guitar riff to it?
Yeah, it's got kind of a soul feel to it too.
Yeah, and it's so as predictable as you can be with some of your songs, then you'll throw something in there like that, and I didn't see it coming, but it works. And
I got an Elko style poem on my new record.
Oh really?
Only it's about bad tattoos from the 1990s. It's called the tattoos. It's called No Regrets.
No regrets. We there's been a meme going around since the lockdown with the no regrets guy, but it says essential, but it's like essential for the tattoo. So I maybe have to get a.
It's funny you're saying that the red dirt scene was the first. Like I've been playing in Canada for a long time, but years and years ago, the Texans and the Oklahoma people were the first people to really embrace our stuff and sort of like all those guys, Reckless and Turnpike and Hayes. That sort of scene kind of adopted us, and they've been real good to us.
Yeah, it's a good scene to be a part of.
Awesome. I love. It's a real community. It's really cool.
Yeah, it seems like it. And the audience is too. I mean, I started introducing a bunch of my buddies. I went to school in Fort Collins there at Colorado State. And and this was back in the day of like LimeWire. So I don't know how many computers I fried just pirating music, but it was all red dirt stuff. Like like I said, it started with Great Divide, and then, that opened up into the rest of the Oklahoma scene, and that opened into the Texas scene. And
it makes me wish I was around for that Stillwater thing, because I wasn't down there at that time. I was in Canada, but I hear so many stories from Boland and Cody and all those guys about how that scene was really vibrant at one time. Hey?
Yeah, I think it was. I had some some friends and from high school that lived down in Stillwater for a while, and they I'd come home and I'd be bragging about the shows that we saw at the Aggie Theater there in Fort Collins, because we'd get the Texas red dirt scene swing through about twice a year. It was usually in the summer when they were coming back from the Braun Brothers reunion, or in January, February during Stock Show and Music Fest there in Steamboat.
You talking about Fort Collins?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you hit the swing station?
Oh yeah. Swing station's a good time. They're in LaPorte. I forget who I saw play there. It was a Texas guy, but it was like in January, right after Music Fest. And but I'd always brag to my friends back home about the shows I'd seen in Fort Collins, and then the people that lived in Oklahoma, they're like, well, yeah, we saw them twice last week or something like that. So
it's funny because Texas and Oklahoma too, they have a real like, it's not just the bands, it's the audiences too. Like I always tell people, Texas is more tuned into music. Like the average person on the street is more tuned into music than almost anywhere. Like I say always, Texas and Ireland are the two places that people just, it's woven into the culture a lot more than most places. Like just anywhere has like a 5% of the population or whatever that follows independent music, or maybe less, I don't know. But in Texas, like the average guy on the street might know Randy Rogers or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
they really support their own.
Pretty neat. Oh yeah, for sure. And it's kind of become infectious. There's like they were the kind of a social media scene before social media was a thing. Like everybody knew, like, hey, Randy Rogers is going to be playing over here, and Stoney's going to play over here, and like everybody knew about it before social media was a thing. So I think it seems like everybody knows a little bit of red dirt country now, and it's part of the community aspect that made it like that.
Yeah. The other interesting thing that we run into is that when I first, like years and years ago, when I was first starting to play Western music, I moved to Austin for a year. And then I've lived there a couple of times for months at a time. And when I first went down there, I expected there to be, Western swing on every corner, but there wasn't. It was mostly, more like kind of a rock style country, and which is cool. But I expected in Texas for there to be a lot more cowboy stuff, and there really wasn't. And it's interesting because there's kind of a sub scene of Western bands like me and Ian Tyson and the guys that play Elko, Ned, and Chancey Williams in Wyoming. There's a few of us doing Western stuff, but that's very rare too. Even within that scene, even within the underground country scene, there's not very much cowboy stuff. Culture Wall's doing some of it. Yeah,
and it's like I said, it's refreshing to see that, because when you hear country music, the average person, I think they think cowboy or redneck or something, but when you get really into country music, there's not a lot of cowboy stuff. I mean, there was
less and less.
Marty Robbins back in the day, which I've heard you say, the Gunfighter Ballads was one of your most formative albums, and I have to agree on my end too. Like I grew up listening to Marty Robbins, and I love that album.
Can I show you something? Just give me 2 seconds. I got something really cool.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. We got all sorts of treasures happening here. Hey, thanks to all you folks watching out there. Greetings from Saskatchewan, Paul Martin. Yeah, we like the Okies. We like to give you shit, but we like you just the same.
Back.
All right.
So yeah, that Marty Robbins record, Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs, is still to this day my favorite record. I went down a eBay rabbit hole. I got the CD.
Nice.
I got the LP.
Hell yeah.
I got the 8-track.
Oh shit.
I got the cassette.
Nice.
And this is the crowning achievement. I got the reel-to-reel.
Oh shit, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Isn't that cool?
That is awesome.
And I got the El Paso 45 too.
Nice. I like it. I was stoked when you announced on your Instagram here a while back that you were doing a Marty Robbins cover on the cover of your Tracks album, and Hanging Me Tonight's always been one of my favorite ones. It's such a
That's a beauty,
depressing
right?
song, but I love it. And I thought you did it justice. I thought you did a hell of a job on it.
Chris Isaak surf vibe on it, kind of.
Yeah, it was neat. I liked it. Anytime anybody does a Marty Robbins number, that makes them good in my book.
Have you there's gunfighter ballads and trail songs, and then there's the second one is more gunfighter ballads and trail songs, and then there's a third one called Return of the Gunfighter. So that's about 30 tunes. But somebody, because Marty's got pop songs too and rockabilly stuff.
Oh yeah.
But somebody pointed me to this CD collection. It's like a box set of 4 CDs, and it's called Under Western Skies. And each CD's got like 25 tunes, all cowboy stuff, a bunch of shit I'd never heard before.
Really?
Yeah, it's called Under Western Skies, and there's like 100 songs that would fit on gunfighter ballads, but ones I'd never heard of before.
Awesome. Well, you'll have to text that to me so I don't forget, and I'll add it to my playlist.
Oh, go ahead.
Speaking of which, there's 2 Burnin Daylight playlists on Spotify. You go check them out. There's the Burnin Daylight featured music, and then the Burnin Daylight request list, which is public and open. So you're welcome to add some stuff to it if you like, Corb.
Sure, I will.
And but it's a pretty awesome playlist if I do say so myself. So every episode that I put out on audio, I lead in with about a minute of the featured music, and then I fade out into the full song. Probably get me in trouble with the copyright people at some point. But either way, I don't try to make any money off the music. It's just to highlight the episode, or just highlight a new song that I particularly like. So. But anyway, I put every song that I featured on that playlist, and it's pretty good. It's got everything from Jimi Hendrix, Star Spangled Banner, to Eminem, to Ian Tyson and Corb Lund. So it's got a little menagerie there, but it's pretty good.
I've been going through a James McMurtry phase lately.
Oh yeah.
I like him, but how you kind of have an artist and you listen to him, and then a couple of years go by and you rediscover him over and over.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening the hell out of Ruby and Carlos lately.
Nice. I'll have to look him up. I'm not familiar with a whole lot of his stuff, so I'll have to.
Here's Ruby and Carlos, Choctaw Bingo.
Oh yeah.
We Can't Make It Here No More, and Copper Canyon. That's a good little playlist.
Nice. I will for sure look that up. I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't ask you. So your I guess it's not your latest single, but the previous single, 90 Seconds of Your Time.
Yep.
Is that, I don't know the chronology. That's the correct chronological order.
Yep.
Okay. So when you played the dance there at Elko, me and my wife were there, and you said that you had wrote this song while you were, or about an elk hunting trip that you went on with Evan Felker of the Turnpike Troubadors. So can you shed a light onto what all transpired and caused you to write this song?
Sure. Do you want the medium length version or the short version or the long version?
Well, let's go for the long version. We got a little bit of time, so let's dive deep.
Okay. So yeah, 2 years ago, Evan's a good buddy of mine. He called me up and wanted to know if I wanted to go on a pack trip in Idaho to hunt elk, a bow hunt. And I said, sure. So the guide that we had with us, he wasn't officially guiding us, but he was from that area. His name is Kurt, and he's probably in mid 50s. He's a retired ranger instructor from the Army.
Okay.
So super capable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like awesome guy, but he can do everything, like shoe horses and run mule strings and start fires in a brainstorm, all that stuff, kill people, yeah. I'm sure. But so yeah, and another buddy of ours from Oklahoma, actually named Gatlin. So the four of us, so you fly to Boise, and then you drive 3 hours to this little town called Riggins, mm-hmm. and then you take all the animals up this switchback for 45 minutes to the trailhead. and then you pack everything up and you go. We rode in 20 miles or something like that. It was real rugged. I've done a lot of rugged stuff, but this is one of the most rugged things I've ever done. Those mountains in Idaho are straight up and down.
Oh, wow.
So anyway,
So how is Evan Felker on horseback?
good. He's good. He's great.
Good. That's kind of cool to hear.
Yeah, he's a hand. We were all learning a lot from Kurt about mules. I hadn't had any experience with mules. And
they're
so
different creatures.
I don't know how much of it I retained, but he taught us how to pack, like tie loads properly, and how to run a string. It was pretty cool, actually.
Nice.
He supplies mule strings for the forest fire guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he does for a living.
Nice.
But, yeah. So anyway, we're in there for about 10 days. And what we would do, we'd had a base camp, and we would take the animals and ride a few miles to where we wanted to hunt that day, tie them up, go hunt, come back in the evening, take them back to base camp. That was the routine. And so day 8, I think, we came back about 10 at night. And we were a little early for the rut. It was a bow hunt, so you got to get close to them. So we weren't having any luck. So we stayed out real late, and it was getting dark. We came back about 10. It was pretty dark, and all of the animals except for my mule had come untied and left, and none of the leads were broken, right? So we didn't know what the hell happened, because we all know how to tie up animals, and we all different. There's 4 of us tying them up, so it was not like one guy screwed it all up, you know. And so the chances of them coming untied on their own seem slim. So, and like I say, they didn't break the leads. You could even see the lead ropes dragging on the trail. Right? So Kurt was real hot, because they're all his animals. He was real upset, giving us shit for not being able to tie shit up, and then he realized that his was gone too. So we spent the next 2 or 3 days, of the last 3 days of the hunt, trying to track down these animals. There was 3 or 4 mules and a mare, and we looked at we saw lots of sign, but we couldn't find them. And Kurt had previously told us all these crazy, like, he's done a lot of tours overseas in the Middle East and Afghanistan and stuff. So he's done some shit, right?
Yeah.
And he's telling us about all these altercations he'd been in with the cops since he's been home, and all these crazy situations. He's a great guy, super lovable, but you definitely want him on your side, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
So he's telling us all these crazy stories. And meanwhile, we're looking before we lost the animals. And then when we're tracking these mules, the whole time he's muttering about how great it's going to be to find these guys that stole the mules and bury them in the hills of Idaho, because he grew up around here and no one's ever going to find the bodies and shit, right? And after a day or 2 of this, I'm freaking out in my head, right? And I finally had to stop him and say, I was in kind of my nerdy way, I was like, Kurt, I need 90 seconds of your time here to make sure we're not actually going to murder anybody, because I'm not down with spending my life in American prison, you know? And I was taking him pretty seriously, because some of the situations he told us about previously were pretty hairy, right? And he kind of just laughed and said, oh, no, we'll just shoot him in the leg, he says. So that's kind of what the song is about. It's about me saying, trying to talk him out of wreaking vengeance on whoever stole the animals. But in the end, we had to walk out. Like, we'd ridden 20 miles in with all of our gear. There was one old senile mule named Red who stuck around the base camp, because he's too senile and old to follow the other mules, I guess. But he was a godsend, because we all had stuff to do. Like, by the end of the hunt, me and Evan had shows to play and planes to catch, so we had to get out of there. So we had to hike out the 20 miles. And if we wouldn't have been for that old senile mule who carried out our packs, we had to pack our stuff out 20 miles. It would have been brutal. So it turns out that the old Red passed away right after that. So that was he was 20 something. So old Red, the mule, performed his last noble mission by getting our stuff. But we found the mules a couple days later, because they just went straight back to base camp, as they do, like homing pigeons, right? And they went right on past there, right back to the trailhead. So we found them, but Kurt didn't find the mare till like 6 or 8 weeks later. He found her miles and miles away, still with the saddle on her, and she was okay.
Wow.
Straight. So to this day, we still don't know. It's a mystery, and we'll never know if they got untied miraculously on their own, or more likely, we think what happened is, you know, hunters are funny. They're territorial sometimes. Like, so maybe somebody didn't like what was going on and untied them.
Maybe so.
It was quite a harrowing experience. And another interesting thing about it that I haven't really told anybody is that, so when we came back, is this story getting too long?
No, I was going to tell the listeners we're breaking news here on the Burnin Daylight podcast, breaking stories.
Yeah. So another interesting thing was that when we first got back to where we tied the animals up, Kurt went right into leader mode. You can tell he's led men, right? So he snapped right into crisis mode, leadership mode, right? And so he told me right away to get on my mule, because my mule is the only one left, to get on the mule and double time it back to the base camp to see if the animals were there and try to wrap them up there, right? And so I didn't question. I was like, okay, but it was pitch black by then, and it was real steep, and I couldn't have found my way back. I might have been able to, in the daylight, but maybe not, because we took a different route every day. And I was like, I told Kurt, I was like, I'll do my best, but I don't know, I can't guarantee I'll get back there. And I had no food left or water, but he said, oh, the mule will get you there. And he was right. The mule did, but there were three things freaking me out. One is it was pitch black. I didn't know where the hell I was. Number two, this mule is at a slow lope on these switchbacks that are like, on a slope like that. But I get, mules are sure-footed, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And the third thing is we've been seeing cougar sign all over the place, right? Like big old cougar tracks. And I don't think they'd mess with 3 or 4 guys, but I was starting to think they might mess with one guy,
Yeah.
You wouldn't see him. You'd just be jumped off your horse and that'd be it. But so I was pretty freaked out. And but I made it back to camp, and I put 2 halters on the mule because I didn't want him getting away. I tied him up twice. But
that's awesome.
But yeah, it was very harrowing, but it was a real fun. Like at the end of it, when I got on the plane, I was like, I'm never doing that again. But now, once a couple weeks passed, I was like, I need to do that again.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a good trip.
Funny. You're talking about that mare still having a saddle on her. I had a guy on. He's kind of a buddy of mine now. His name's Scott Hall. He's a Cowboy Buckaroo horse trainer from Idaho. And he said he was on, I think it was on the Spanish ranch down in Nevada. And they were on the wagon, Brandon gathering, and they saw this Indian fella come into camp, and they talked to the cow boss, and this guy was well-known roper, just salty hand, but he pulled in with the pickup, and yeah. Okay. Just like real salty. It's from what he was telling me, and they didn't know what he was there for, and so the cow boss came up to Scott and said, "Hey, he lost his horse at a Brandon." They said this he was a real nice Palomino horse, and but he knew that if he got off, that horse was going to probably pull away and run off. So he had tied his McCarty around his waist so that horse don't get away from him. Well, they were Brandon. He had him tied up, and some a little dirt devil or something blew through, spooked the horses, and he broke that horse broke the McCarty and took off. And so he was telling all the outfits around to kind of keep an eye out, and Scott said the Cowboys had to go to town or something, and so he was in charge, and they knew there were some wild horses right around there, and he said, all right, boys, we're gonna go rope us a wild horse. And so they come up on this little herd, and they spot this flashy Palomino, and they said, well, it was way out, and they just could tell it was Palomino, but there was something different about it. So they get up there, and he said he was on his, everybody's on their fast horse. He told them, get your good fast horse, because we're going to go rope a Mustang. And they see that Palomino with the saddle still on it. And he said, all right, I'm going to rope this sucker. And he said he goes trucking on in, builds him a loop and goes flying on in. And that Palomino just left him like he was standing still. And so they end up, they were able to push him through this bottleneck into their camp, and they got him there in Roe Deer and roped him out. And I forget who he said the maker of that saddle was, but it was a very famous maker, and there was probably about a $7,000 or $8,000 saddle on that horse. And
on a $300 horse, probably.
probably, yeah. So I guess that they were gonna. He put it in his teepee before some of the shadier characters could make off with it, but that Indian fella came back in and collected his saddle and shot the horse, I think. It was pretty neat tale. I'll send you the link.
That was on the Spanish?
I think so. I'll send you the link to that episode. He does that story a lot better justice than I do, but it's pretty neat listening to him. I never, where I grew up, we didn't have that big wide open country like that. You know, it was wide open, but it's all private land, so it's parceled down to about a quarter section to a half section. So we didn't have quite that type of deal going on. So it's cool hearing stories about those, the Nevada, Idaho, Utah Buckaroos.
Yeah, I wasn't aware until I started traveling down there about how much BLM land there is they ranch on down there, huh?
Oh man, it's huge expanses. But
it's interesting because you hear people talking about the efficiency of putting grazing animals on land that could be raising crops. But what some of those people don't understand is that there's a huge part of the earth that's not arable land, and the only way to create food from that is putting grazing animals on it, right?
Mm-hmm. You look up in Idaho or Nevada, and it's just desert or just rocky and thick brush, and there's no way you could farm any of that.
Yeah, that it was cool. You know that Ian Tyson song, "The MC Horses"?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know well enough to remember the lyrics? You know the part about banjo?
Oh yeah.
I met some kids at Elko. They're from I think they're from Oregon.
Okay.
I guess they would be, but they said that I think they told me that they sold banjo to the MC when he
Oh really?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Somebody else told me that banjo from the song was considered one of the better broke horses on the place.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing. That's funny is like, Ian Tyson's the legend that he is, there's not a whole lot of people that know about him. He's
it's a subculture, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what's funny though is a lot of people know his songs because
mm-hmm.
a lot of famous people have recorded "Someday Soon" and "Four Strong Winds" and that. Right?
Yeah.
So even if you don't know him, you probably heard Neil Young play "Four Strong Winds," or you probably heard Susie Bogus sing "Someday Soon," right?
Yeah, exactly.
I just talked to Ian yesterday. He's doing good. He's out on the ranch going stir crazy.
Oh, I bet.
All of his shows got canceled, just like all of ours, eh?
Yeah, if he's real bored, you can tell him to call into the Burnin Daylight podcast.
I don't think he's got a connection. Like it's funny because he tells me we bullshit about it a lot, and he's like, yeah, Corb. He calls me Corbo. He's like, Corbo, I gotta get on this internet stuff. And he asked me if I'm getting played on the radio, and I said no, not really. But I told him it doesn't really matter. Like no one's getting played on the radio anymore except for the shitheads, right?
Yeah.
But I tell him you gotta. It's all online now. It's all streaming and podcasts and stuff. And he's like, well, you gotta get me on that stuff. But then when I tell him to do this, I tell him you should do this or that, and he's like, it sounds like a bunch of bullshit.
Well, tell him all he has to do is call me on the phone, and I can record it, and we'll put it out.
Okay.
We'll shoot the shit.
I'll tell him.
Awesome. That'd be great.
I talked to Felker yesterday too. I talked to Felker and Tyson yesterday. It was a good day.
Well, if Felker's bored too, I don't know if they're quarantined in Oklahoma or not, but
yeah, I think everybody's quarantined. He's been writing, which is good news to me. He's one of my favorite songs. He's a real good buddy, but it's strange when when your friends are also your favorite writers, because you kind of wonder like, well, is he just my favorite because he's my buddy? But he's not. He's fucking really good.
He's something special. We've talked about on this show quite a bit. Like I'm really glad that I'm alive at the same time as he is and get to witness his artwork.
There's something really literate about his writing. Like his persona is kind of a good old boy, and he is one, but he's very well read, that guy. He's He's very literate, Evan.
Well, you can tell like his lyrics, while it is very kind of down home the way he writes, there is some real intelligence behind it. I mean, you can tell it's a thinking man's song with plain man lyrics, you know. It's
and the sound of their band really complements it too. Like the band, they have one of the best bands around, in my opinion.
Oh, I think so. We were my buddy Sam McHugh, which if you ever get to Coeur d'Alene, you'll have to look him up. He's got a little recording studio in his basement, and he calls them the Bar 330 sessions. You'll have to check him out if you're ever up there. But we were talking about how the timing and how complementary everything is. Like, you know, you can really overpower with a fiddle, but like they do like a little call and echo between the Telecaster and the fiddle, and it's really neat. They're, like you said, they're one of the best bands out there, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
and to top it off, they've got a phenomenal writer at the front of the ship, right?
Yeah, amazing vocalist, excellent writer. I mean, it's just they got the whole deal, and they're doing the world a disservice by not getting back together.
I got my fingers crossed.
Yeah, I do.
I know
too.
Evan's writing tunes, so that's a good sign.
That's always a good sign. So
he sounded great. He sounded really good. Sounds like he's doing great.
Cool. I guess I don't know how much more time you got, but I was wanted to ask a little bit about you growing up. I know you said your dad was a large animal vet. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And your mom was a nurse. Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Remembering?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're both ranch people. But my grandfathers were the last generation in our family that made a living just from cows, because you know how it goes. It gets chopped up every generation.
Yeah. So I guess to lead into that, I was going to ask you, like, how much of Les Lazy H is about your personal history, and how much is just an overall story about, you know, an agricultural tragic.
Yeah, it's not about my family at all, actually, that one. I have a lot of my songs that are, but that one's not. That one's a combination of things, like the details of the song, like the brand name, the SLZ, and the son that wants to fly planes but stays on the ranch, and the daughter that goes out east to go to law school. That's all my friend's story. His name's Scott. He's Holtman from the Truck Song.
Oh, okay.
He's like a childhood friend. My dad was his dad's vet. We've been friends since before we were born.
That's awesome.
But he's not going through that. Like, thankfully, we always joked we're keeping an eye on her, on his sister, though. She's a good friend. But all the details, like the setting, is from Scott's. I just took Scott's.
I see.
But the actual loss of the ranch is just kind of 2 or 3 other stories I've heard, you know. So I took those stories and put it in his framework, kind of thing.
I see.
So in a sense, it's a true story in that I hear it all the time, but it's not. It's an amalgam of a few different things. But you know what's funny about that song is, it's like 5.5 minutes long, and I normally keep my songs shorter and snappier. And I didn't know if that would resonate with people because I thought it might bore them. But that song has taken on a life of its own, and almost every single show I play in the American or Canadian West, there's 1 or 2 people with their heads hung low and come up to me at the end of the show and tell me that they're going through that right that moment, which is terrible. But I mean, I guess it's good that the song means something to them. But it's it's rough, because I mean, I think it's a natural thing, because you know, there's no more cheap land, and like in the European system, the oldest son got all the land, the second son went to the clergy, and the third son was left to his own devices, right?
Yeah.
What do they call it? The retinue man? What do they call that? The kid that just goes off somewhere and they just send him a check to stay alive.
Oh yeah,
it starts with an R.
I can't think. And
Doesn't
then when
matter.
he comes home, he's the prodigal son. But
but the point is, you know, if you're dividing the land up between your 2 or 3 or 4 kids, you know, what are you going to do? And you can't usually, you know, as you know, you can't just divide it by the number of kids and come up with that kind of cash and buy out the other kids, because no one can afford that, right?
Yeah.
There's some kind of, it's actually funny because a few people have told me they've used that song as sort of an introduction to their estate planning seminars. Because there's some way that they do it now where they take out they have a plan for this where if you do it early enough, they set up a life insurance policy on the dad, and the ranch pays into it, and it's made to be roughly worth that chunk. Like make it simple. If there's two kids, one kid wants to ranch, the other one doesn't. The ranch business pays into an insurance policy on dad, mom and dad, whatever. And when they go, the insurance payout goes to the kid that doesn't get the land. That way you keep the land in one piece. That's one way.
Smart. That's smart.
But it's tricky because what has to happen really is that song's really about estate planning. And what really has to happen is the dad has to say, when he's still active and of sound mind, say, okay, son number one, you've worked on the ranch for 10 years of your life. You get this much. Son number two, you get something, but not as much because you went to school out east. Daughter number three, you married somebody else, so you get part of it, but not as much as. But the dad's got to lay it out and say, this is what I want. And you know, they can still contest it, but it's much more clear if the parents, if mom and dad say that's their wishes, right? But when those old boys think they're never going to die, I think they're immortal, right? So they never get around to it, and then they leave a big shit mess.
Yeah, it's I've witnessed it happen. One of my good buddies was actually when my mom was on her last leg. She passed from breast cancer here a while back, and my probably my best friend. I was at his house, and we were talking about the whole situation, and we were talking about his dad, and I said, well, Homer, he's always going to be the, you know, that old rancher that's at the coffee shop at 4:30 in the morning, not gossiping, obviously, not gossiping, but just catching up on the news. And the next day he got a big square bale of corn stalks blown over on him and crushed him, and wow, they life flighted him to Wichita, and he didn't make it. And and then so his wife and my buddy were just left to pick up the slack, you know. And it was they've come through, you know, very strong. They're good people. They all had good heads on their shoulders, but it's just one of those freak accidents that you never know when that shit's gonna happen. So it's crazy how life works.
Yeah.
So I guess you probably got to be getting going, I'd imagine. But to wrap it up, your new album is called Agricultural Tragic.
You know what that is I've been joking for years that I had to invent my own subgenre because we don't quite fit in any of the other ones. So I've been saying for years that's my own self-invented subgenre. So I thought I better get it out there publicly to make sure nobody steals it.
There you go. And if you self-proclaim it, that makes it 100% real, I think. So, so that was scheduled to release this month. Of course, the COVID happened and threw a wrench in everybody's plan. But you're gonna push that to June, is that right?
Yeah, June 26th. Yeah. June
26th. So
and it's kind of weird releasing a record into a pandemic, but I don't know, like we can't hold on to it forever. And I don't know, by then people might be itching for some new music anyway. So
well, I imagine people would buy it today if you released it. I don't think the, you know, pandemic or not, I think they'd still buy it. But
we put 2 singles out. We put out 90 Seconds of Time that we talked about, and then another song called Old Men. And we're gonna put a couple more singles up before the record comes out, so there'll be some more new music being released. And we also have I wrote so many songs for this album that there's 3 or 4 that didn't even make the record. So we got those in the can too. So we'll have lots of new music to put out over the next while.
Awesome. And you're doing some live stream shows periodically from your bunker.
Yeah, let me just keep talking. I'm gonna check the dates on that.
Okay, yeah. So Corb is literally getting down on the mountain right now with you're kind of a prophet in your own right. You called this shit happening. Luckily, I don't think there's any real craziness where you're gonna need to pass the ammo yet, but it's looking more and more like it all the time. But it's funny how that getting down on the mountain song's taking on a whole new life. Mm-hmm. I remember when that album came out, I listened to it and I've always been a sucker for like apocalyptic thriller novels and
you know, like The Road.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I've always been a sucker for that type of deal, whether it be a pandemic or like a nuclear explosion. Like, have you ever read Lavoy Finicum's book?
No, which one?
I think it's his only one, but it's called I forget what the name of it is, but it's a apocalyptic thriller about a EMP pulse.
Yeah.
And but that's what it reminded me of, the getting down on the mountain is some scenario like that. And now here we are with half the world shut down. And
Well, you know about that is you'll know this, but it's funny because the whole prepping thing, if you're a rural person, that's just kind of normal, right? To an
yeah,
extent.
I think so.
Because like where mom grew up in the Rockies, I mean, they always had a month worth of food, because you never know when it doesn't have to be an apocalypse, but you never know, a blizzard might keep you home for 4 weeks, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
my dad has been storing water in like empty vinegar jugs, empty whiskey bottles, and just stashing them all throughout the house. And he's probably got 1,000 gallons of drinking water just stashed randomly throughout the estate there. I don't.
The way I was looking at it years ago when I kind of put together some food and stuff is like, you can take, I don't know, $1,000 or $500 or not that much money, and just go to the grocery store casually on an afternoon and set yourself up for a lot of scenarios. Whereas if you wait until shit's all sideways, then it's a crisis. But the whole time I was thinking, imagine doing this when there's no food on the shelves. But normally, I mean, there's all the, and you know, survival food's cheap. You know, you can get a big bag of rice for $30, right?
Oh yeah, rice and beans will last you a long time.
And grab a 12-pack of lighters while you're at, you know, all kinds of stuff that you take for granted, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Go ahead.
I was telling my wife, I'm just gonna start. I don't smoke cigarettes at all, but I'm gonna start buying some just for barter material, whiskey and cigarettes. You know,
yeah. I read this guy. Do you know who Jeff Cooper is?
I've heard the name. I can't. He's
a gun writer. He writes about guns.
Okay.
He's basically the inventor of modern pistol technique.
Mm-hmm.
And he's dead now, but he wrote for Guns and Ammo for years. But he wrote an article. He's got a bunch of books of essays, and one of his essays is a really good one on the case for ammunition as currency. It's really smart because it's useful, and you know, it's not going to devalue for, you know, if you got it's got hunting use and defense use, but it's also portable, and it doesn't degrade, right?
Yeah.
And also, you know, if you got gold and silver is great, but how do you pay for breakfast, right?
Yeah.
It's too much. Whereas you might, you know, maybe you trade a couple of shells for breakfast, right? So it's actually, he had this policy when he was alive that whenever he was buying ammunition, he'd always buy twice as much, and he'd use one and put one in his stash. But if having a big pile of all the common calibers for your own use, but also have an extra for barter is really smart.
Yeah.
Or like you said,
that's brilliant, really.
Or what, anything, right?
Cigarettes, whiskey, ammo, just anything.
And actually, alcohol is really good too, because in a pinch you can use it for disinfectant, right?
Yeah, and as you said in your little tutorial for washing your hands, you can try to kill a virus internally too. So
or kill the pain anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. My grandpa always said he drank a boatload of whiskey, but he always said it was for medicinal purposes only.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you self-proclaim it, that makes it 100% true. So
my guitar player's grandma used to take a big stiff shot of Jagermeister every morning. She said it was her medicine. Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. I think growing up for me, it was either Jim Beam or Jack Daniels was the daily starter for the old cowhands. They'd have a pint flask in their saddlebag, and you know, you had to wait for the sun to come up. So, and it was cold, so you had to warm up. So they'd pass around the beam, and then you had to celebrate finding the cows once you got there. And then once you got them started, you had to celebrate no wrecks getting them started. So by the time they got back to the corrals, you know, they weren't worth a single fuck at that point. But
hey, I dug up my live stream schedule
Okay.
So yeah, all next week we're doing Facebook Live next week. So April 7th, April 11th, and April 13th. We're doing different times to stagger it. One's at 6 p.m. and 2 p.m. It's online. Just look it up. It's easy to find. But yeah, I'll be on Facebook the 7th, the 11th, and the 13th in the afternoon and evening.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to tune in. I appreciate your time. It's awesome that you came on and bullshitted for as long as you did. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you come back soon.
Yeah, it was fun. That I've told that elk hunting story a bunch, but never in that much detail. So that you got the most detailed version of it.
Hell yeah, I feel honored or something. It was awesome. I enjoyed it. You're welcome back anytime. If you wanna promote anything, whenever, give me a holler. And
Thanks for having me.
You bet. If you don't mind, if you'll sign us off. Move your ass.
Okay. All right, folks, move your ass. We're burning daylight.
All right. Thanks,
Adios.
Corb. I appreciate it.